So now we have the next topic, which is nested functions. So nested function is nothing but a function inside a function. As we have already seen in the list and loops, we had nested loops, nested lists, and now we have nested functions. So let's quickly move to the example, which is like this. For example, we have a function for trading decisions. So define, and let's give it the name trading decisions. And inside that, we have two functions. One is buy decision, let's say, and another is sell decision, right? Sell decision. And let's close this function. Okay. And also we can give some return here. So now we have three functions. The main function is trading decisions. Inside that we have two functions. The first is buy decision and the second is sell decision, right? So whenever this first function, which is buy decision, executes, will return a value, which is, let's say, a string. And whenever this sell function executes, will return a string, which is sell. Hopefully it's very easy and it should be very clear, right? Okay. So let's give some conditions. And what we will do, we will give here a parameter, which is price. So if price is less than 50, let's say 50, then what will happen? We will call the function buy decision, right? Else we can call the sell decision, right? So now let's just hit shift enter and call the function trading decisions, and let's give it some value. So which is, let's say we give 40. Okay. And when we hit shift enter, okay, we have to print this return value. So for that, what we need to do, we will just print here. So hit shift enter. It says none. Okay. We forgot to return this. So here we have to return these functions. So my bad. So what we can do, I'll just hit shift enter, and so now you can see that we have a price which is 60 and that is greater than the 50. So the sell function will execute and we will return as sell. If we have a value less than 50, let's say 40, then a buy decision will happen. So this is how the nested functions work, a function inside function, and you will be using a lot these kind of functions. So what you can do, you can just go to MCQs, you can attempt those MCQs, and then you should go to task where you have multiple good algo trading based tasks, and then you have a mini project which will definitely help you to build up your functions concepts. And still, if you have any doubts, you can connect with us on any social media like Discord, Telegram, Instagram, and even YouTube comments. Next, we have one of the most important concept of Python, which is functions are considered as first-class citizens. This line seems a little bit different, right? But when you understand the real meaning of this line, you will be blown away, because Python functions are so powerful, so flexible, which makes the Python a very powerful language, a very flexible language. So let me show you quickly why Python functions are considered as first-class citizens. So let me show you few pointers. The first is assignment to variables. We can assign functions to any variable like we do in string, integers, list, tuples. So it helps us to call a function with the help of a variable. So functions can be assigned to variables. The second point is functions can be passed as an arguments. It can be useful for higher order functions, which can take function as an input and also can return them. So you can say functions can be passed as arguments to other functions. The third point is the functions can be returned from other functions. The fourth point is the functions can be stored in data structures like in dictionaries, tuples, or lists. And last but not the least, function can have attributes to store metadata or configuration options. And so why this behavior of functions is useful? So the first is we can create higher order functions so that we can manipulate other functions and which can enhance the modularity and reusability. The second is callback and event handlers. Generally, this is used in GUIs, so we can use this in response to certain actions. We'll be also having a quick session of how to create GUIs in Python. And the third point is this behavior is really useful in the functional programming. And this is also useful in the dynamic behavior. So let's quickly understand this topic with the help of few examples. as we have discussed multiple times that in Python, everything is object, right? So we can say that functions are also objects in Python. How? Let me show you. So let's define a function and give it any name. So let's say define, and let's give the name trading logs. Okay. Then what we will do, we'll just pass it. Okay, so it doesn't give any error. And then here, what we will do, we'll print the type of this function. So type and trading logs. And then we will also print the ID of this. So with the help of ID function, we can print out the memory address of that particular object. So here we have the object as a function. So let's give trading logs. And when we hit shift enter, we can see that the class is function. So earlier we have seen that for all the other objects like list, tuples, dictionaries, it was showing here the class list, class dictionary, class tuples. Similarly, here we have the object as functions, and that we have the class as function. And this is the memory address of that, right? Now let's see an example where we can reassign the functions to any other variable, right? So let's take this example again here. And what I will do, I'll define this, and here I can say that we are getting some values here. So let's say price 1 and price 2. And what we can do, we can print the sum. So we can return the sum, right? So return the sum of this price 1 and price 2. Correct? So here what I'll do, I'll just call the function in the second line. So here when I call the function trading logs, and I'll give two values, let's say 2 and 3, and we get 5 as a return, right? So if I want, what I can do, I can assign this function to any other variable. Let's say I'll assign it to a variable named sum of the prices. So sum prices. And now when I call this function sum price, and here also I can pass the arguments, and when I hit shift enter, we get the value as 5. So here you can see the flexibility of Python, that we can assign a function to any other variable, and it becomes really useful. We'll be seeing some use cases in the future when we start the algo trading live examples and live projects. So it will be very useful in that. So now let's take an example where we will be deleting a function. So let's say, let's take the same example here again and paste it here. And what I'll do, I'll just add another cell, and here we can print that analyzing a function deletion. Okay. So when I hit shift enter here, and when I call this function, and let me remove this price is not required for now. I'll just remove and hit shift enter. And when I call this function trading logs, we can see that we have a string named analyzing a function deletion, and which is returning from this function, right? So if I delete here the function, delete trading logs, and after that when I print this function, I can add print here also. It's not an issue. So what I'll do, I'll just print here. Okay. So here you can understand the scenario that first we are calling this function, and it should return this string which is analyzing a function deletion. Then we will delete this function, and then we will again try to call this function. So what happens? So here you can understand the scenario that first we are calling this function. So ideally it should return this string which is analyzing a function deletion. Then we will delete the function with the help of del operator, and again we will try to call the function. So let's hit shift enter. So here you can see that it says cannot delete a function call. So when we add this parenthesis in front of the function name, that means we are calling a function. So we cannot delete a function call, but we can delete a function with the name. So what we will do, we'll just remove this, and when I hit shift enter, you will see that it says name trading log is not defined. But before that, first it printed this value analyzing a function deletion, then it deleted, and now when we try to print, it will throw an error. So that's how we can delete a function, and it is also very useful sometimes. I'll show you how in the future when we are performing a live trading. So here let's see how we can store a function in any object like a list, tuple, dictionary. So for example, we have a function with the name define by stock, and we have a parameter with the name stock. Here what we will do, we will return. So whenever this function executes, it will return a string which says by and stock. So for stock we will give this, and here we can give a formatted string, so f. So means whenever this function executes, it will return a by and whatever the name of the stock. So here we can see that whenever this function executes, it will return a value, this is string, and it will display by and whatever the stock has been passed as an argument. Again, we have next function, and we can name it as cell stock, and here we can change from by to cell. Correct. Now we'll execute this, and here we can have a dictionary. So let's say actions, and in action we can store the values like the by is the key and value is this by stock, right? So by stock, and again the next key value pair is cell. So in that the key is cell and value of that key is this function called cell stock. So here what is happening, whenever we fetch the value of this key, this will be called, right, the by stock, and when we fetch the value of this cell key, this cell stock function will be executed here. So now how we can proceed? So let's say what I'll do here, I just fetch the value of this key by, so actions, and here I'll give by, and here now I can give the parameter of this stock. So here I have to give a string because here we are returning a string, a formatted string. So what I'll do, I'll just give that by apple. I hope that you are able to understand this logic here. So when I hit shift enter, I get this string by and the value of the this by key, correct? And if I call this cell key, let's say cell. So whenever we fetch the value of cell, we get the cell stock value, and that cell stock value is itself a function here, and when this function executes, it will return us a string which is cell and stock, and here the argument of this stock parameter is apple, or we can change, let's say, BTC. So when I hit shift enter, I get cell BTC. So this is how we can store the function as any object. Now we will see how we can return a function. So what we will do, so let's say we have a function, so define strategy selection, right? And here we can give the name as strategy name, and inside that strategy selection function we have another function, that is another strategy, that is define, let's say this is momentum strategy, and it will return a string, and that is momentum strategy, right? Momentum strategy. And we can define another function, let's say mean reversion strategy. So if this function executes, it will return a string, that is mean reversion strategy, right? So now we give the condition. So if the arguments passed to this parameter strategy name is equal to a string, that is momentum, then it will return this function. So now we are returning a function itself, correct? Else it will return the mean reversion strategy. Hopefully you are able to understand this. It is very easy and very simple. Just practice yourself 2-3 questions and you will be good to go. Okay, now what I'll do, I'll just hit shift enter, and in the next cell we'll call this function. So what we'll do, let's give a name, strategy is equals to the call of this function, and we will give a string momentum, right? Momentum. And then what we can do, we can print the strategy, and we can correct this also. I'll just add another y, and now when we hit shift enter, okay, it will call this function, and when we have the momentum, it will return the momentum strategy. Okay, and okay, actually we have to add here, okay, now when we hit shift enter, we get mean reversion strategy. So actually we are calling a function, so we have to add here a parenthesis, right? And let's say if I give here any other value except momentum, let's say mean, so it will give us the mean reversion strategy. And if I give here momentum, it will give us momentum strategy. So except momentum, if there is any other value, it will always return us the mean reversion strategy. So that's how you can see that how we can return a function also, correct? So now the last example we have as the function as argument. So let's create a function, define moving average strategy, and here we'll have a parameter with the name price, correct? And it will return us the moving average. So what is the formula of moving average? The sum of the price, correct, and divide by length of the price. So let's say it will be a list, so length of the price. So now let's create another function, that is define execute strategy, and here we'll be having two parameters. One is a function itself, so let's say a strategy function, and another we can have the price. So here I can return strategy function, and inside that we can have the parameter as price, correct? Okay, now we hit shift enter, and here let's say we have a list of prices which contains price as 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. Let's 60. Okay, and now we will print. So what we will do, we'll call this function execute strategy. Inside that we will pass two arguments. The first is strategy function, so we want to execute this function, right? So we can pass this as an argument here, and then we will pass this price list. So I'll write price, and when I hit shift enter we get 34. So now you can see that how powerful the Python is. We can use the functions however we want, and that's why it gives us a flexibility to use Python in multiple ways, and it really becomes very useful for us. So that was the detailed explanation of why functions are considered as first class citizen. And now we will quickly see what are the benefits of using a function. As we have already explained this, it is for the code modularity. So we can break down a code into smaller functions and makes it easier to manage and understand. So the first benefit is code modularity. For example, we have a big application to create, and inside that we can break down that applications to a smaller functions, right? And each functions can be created by our different team members. So in that way, we can execute any task very quickly and very efficiently, right? Then we have the code readability. So instead of having 1,000 lines of code, we can have different sections of function, and in that function we can even define the doc string, so it becomes more readable. If anyone is reading that code, they can able to understand that what this function do and what this part of that code perform, right? So for the code readability. And the third we have is code reusability. So once the function is created, we can use that function in multiple ways, as we have seen recently. So these are the big benefits of using a function, and that's why we consider function as a first class citizen. I think that was a really comprehensive explanation of the functions, and that is it. Now we are moving to the last topic of the functions, which is super important, super easy and super useful. That is lambda functions. So let's understand what are the lambda functions. A lambda function is a small anonymous function. You have to pay attention to these two keywords. Small anonymous function. A lambda function can take any number of arguments but can only have one expression. So there are three keywords. First is small anonymous, second is any number of arguments, and third is can have only one expression. So now let's see how we can define a lambda function. So first of all, we have to write the keyword lambda. Then we write the arguments, or we can say parameters. And I have already explained you the difference between parameters and arguments. And we can have one or more parameters are supported. And all these parameters must be separated by a comma and no parenthesis. Correct? Then we need to give a colon here, and in the final we can have an expression. So it must be a single valid Python expression. It can be only a single expression, right? So now there are a few key points which we need to keep in mind while creating a lambda function. So let me write key points. The first one is anonymous. Means lambda functions are anonymous and they don't need a name. So we can write like don't need a name. Correct. The second key point is single expression. So let me write single expression. So we have seen that. Let me show you it again. See, there is no name. We only write the lambda, and also we can have only single expression in the lambda function. So this is only a single expression. We can have it a negative, we can have it a multiplication, and we can have any other valid Python expression. Correct? Means we can say they are limited to single expression, and for more complex logic we should be using a regular function. And now the last but not the least, we have inline uses. So in short, you can say use and throw. So in short, we can say these are one line functions and they are used for a very short period of time. So that is the theory of the lambda functions. Okay, one more point I forgot to add, that they are used with HOF, higher order functions. I'll just show you quickly what are the higher order functions with the help of some examples. But you can simply say the map function, the reduce function, and the filter function, and also the sorted function. These all are higher order functions. Means they can accept any function as an argument, and they can even return any function as a return statement. So that's how you can define lambda functions. And now we will quickly move to the coding examples of lambda functions. As we have already understood the theory that lambda functions doesn't have any name, lambda functions has no return value. In fact, it returns a function. And also lambda functions are written in one line. Correct? And then the last is lambda functions are not reusable because these are use and throw functions. And also they are used with higher order functions. So let us quickly understand the lambda functions with the help of some examples. So let's say we want to calculate the moving average of the last two prices. So let's say we have a function define moving average. So moving average, and so here we are providing a list, let's say. So we can say prices, and then we will provide a window as a parameter here. So window, then the moving average. So we can say simple moving average is equals to sum of the prices. Correct? Sum of the price divided by the window. Correct? And then it will return the SMA. Hopefully you are getting my point. This is a normal function. So when we hit shift enter, and in the next cell we will call this function. So moving average, and here the prices. So I'll write the argument prices, and window I'll provide is, let's say, 4. So, and here I'll declare a list. So in that I'll be having, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have a list which is having 8 elements of prices, but I want to calculate the SMA of only the last 4 prices. Correct? So what I can do here, I can go here and I can write like window. So what it will do, so we know that this is slicing, right? So, and then I will give a colon. So it will start from the whatever the window we have given, which is 4 here, and it will calculate for only those, right? So when I hit shift enter, and here also shift enter, it says price is not defined. That is true. We have to give this as prices. And now when I hit shift enter, I get the value as 40. So let's see, we have these 4 values, the last one, right? So 8 plus 7 is 15, yes, and 21, and that is 26. So sum of that and divide by window. So it should not give this value actually. This is something wrong here. Sum of the price of the last 4. So from here to here, the sum, and then what it did, it divided that with the window. Let's say I want to calculate for the last 2 prices. So 2 is giving me 55, If I give 1 here, then what I'll return 60. 60 is the sum of this one. 21 up to here, 26, 30, 33, something is okay. Actually, we missed s here. We have to give s. And now when I run, actually my bad, I'm really sorry for that. So when I run shift enter, I get 8. Why? Because the last value is 8 and 8 divided by 1 is 8. So of course I had to change this. I'll take 4, and when I hit shift enter, I get the value as 6.5, which is true. So now how we can achieve this whole functionality in a just single line of code? What we can do, as we have seen in the lambda function theory, that first of all, we have to write the lambda keyword. So lambda keyword, then we have to provide the arguments. So here we know that we have only one argument, that is prices, the list of the prices. So I'll write the prices, and now we have to provide a colon here. So a colon, then we have to provide the expression. So it will be a single expression. So here what we will do, we have this formula, right? So what we can do, we can simply take this or just write it here. So sum of the prices, and we know that we want only the last 4 prices. So I'll write negative of 4. Okay. Then we have to divide that with the window, which is 4. Hope you are getting my point. Correct. Now you have two options. Either you can provide here the list, or you can give the list in like different variable. It is much better for readability. So what we will do, we'll just copy and paste the list here. And now when you hit shift enter, you just get a single object. But in order to print this, what we can do, we'll print and the moving average. So when I hit shift enter, we get an object, correct? So we have to provide here the parenthesis, and now when I hit shift enter, I get an error. This is because we haven't given here the colon, because as we have already understood in the list, tuples and dictionary, that we have to provide the colon here for the indexing or slicing. So now when I hit shift enter, I still get that missing one required positional argument, prices. Yes, of course we have to give here the prices, and when I give it here, and now when I hit shift enter, I get the value as 6.5, which is exactly the same which we get from a regular function. So that's how you can use the lambda function. Now we will use lambda functions in higher order functions, that is map, filter, reduce. So let's start with map. So let's see this question, using map to calculate the square of a list of numbers. So we have a list. Let's say we have a list, price equals to, let's say 2, 3, 4, and again -5, again -5, -6, and -7. So what we want to use the map function to calculate the square of a list of numbers. Okay, so for the regular expression, we know that we can do that, right? But we want to achieve that functionality with the help of lambda functions and map, and in a single line. So what we can do here, so first of all, we'll start with the lambda function. So as per definition, we have to write the lambda keyword first, then we will write the arguments. So the arguments will be here x. Let's say we want to calculate the square of the x, then x power of 2. That is a formula to calculate any square, right? So that is the lambda expression, as simple as that. So if I give like 2 here, we'll be getting 4 for this. But here we have a list. So what we can do, we can use the map function here. So I'll just enclose this within a map function, and map function expects 2 things. The first is the lambda expression here, and the second is it expects a list. So here we will provide the list. So the list is price, right? Now what I can do, I'll just hit shift enter and we get an object, but we want the list which have the square of these numbers. So what we can do, we can again enclose this in a let me enclose this in a list, and now when I hit shift enter, we get the squared of these numbers. So that's how this lambda works, and it's super easy and super flexible and super useful in so many of your situations. Again, the next question is using map to label prices as high or low. So how we can achieve that with the lambda function? So let's say we have a list. So what I'll do, I'll copy and paste it here, and we will just comment it out so it doesn't create any issue like the last program. And I'll give here the values as like 200, 300, 400, -500, -600, and -700. So what we want here, that if the price is greater than 200, it should be labeled as high, and if it's lower than 200, it should be labeled as low. Let's write the lambda function first. So lambda, same, we have to pass the argument here. So let's say x, and now we want to print high, and then condition if x is greater than 200, correct? Else you can print low. It's as simple as that, correct? Now what we will do, we'll just hit shift enter, so we get an object. But here we have a list, and we also want the list as an output. So what we will do, we will use map function again here. So we'll enclose this in map, and here we'll write map function. And as we know that map expects two arguments. The first is the lambda function, and the second is a list. So here again the list is the price, and now when we hit shift enter, again we get an object. But as we know that we want a list, so we'll again enclose this in a list. And when we hit shift enter, and here we can see that the first value is low because it is less than 200. The second, it is greater than 200. The third is also greater than 200. Then we have last three values which are negative values. So of course these will be labeled as low. So the next example is fetch names from a list of stock information dictionaries. As per the question, we have a list which contains stock information dictionaries. So what we can do, let's write a dictionary. So stocks is equals to a list of dictionaries. So let's say we have two dictionaries here, right? Two elements and two dictionaries. So the first dictionary contains the information of one stock, and the next is contains the information of another stock. So let's say we have the first stock, which is a symbol and then a colon, and we have this as apple, and name of that stock is name, and stock is apple, correct? Then another, so let me quickly copy and paste this, and here I will change to BTC, and the name is Bitcoin. Okay, so now we'll use the lambda function here. So as usual, first of all we will write the lambda function here, then the argument, and what we want, that we want the value of that argument. So here x is the key, and we want the value of that key. So value is name, right? We want the apple, correct? And now when I hit shift enter, we get a object here. But what we will do, now we'll map it. So map, and again in map we know that it expects two arguments. First is lambda function, and the second is it expects a list. So here we have a stocks list, stocks, and then we hit shift enter and we get another map object, but we know that we want this in a list. So I'll again enclose this in a list function, and when I hit shift enter, we get apple and Bitcoin. So this is how you can use lambda functions with higher order functions, and it's really useful. And now we quickly take some examples of filter and reduce. So in filter, the filter price is greater than 100. So again, let's say we have a list. So prices, and there we have like 50, 60, 70, 100, 1110, 120, correct? As usual, first we'll write the lambda function, then the argument. So argument is x here. Then what we will do, here is a filter condition that we want only the prices which are greater than 100. So x is greater than 100. Okay. So now when I hit shift enter, we get an object. So what we will do, we'll use the filter function, and similarly, filter also expects two arguments. The first is lambda function, and the second is the list. So now when I hit shift enter, we get an filter object. But as we know that we want this in a list, so I'll just go and enclose this in a list. So we'll get 110 and 120. So that's how it works, and it's very easy. Now we have filter strokes starting with A. For example, we have a stocks, a list, and in that we have few stocks, let's say Apple and Microsoft. Then we have Amazon, and and let's say we have Meta. Correct? So what we want, that we want to filter out only the stocks starting with the A. So as usual, lambda x, then colon, and x should starts with A. Starts with A, right? So when I hit shift enter, we get an object. So again, we'll use the filter here, the filter function. So filter, and as usual, it expects a lambda function and a list. So here we have a list stocks, and when we hit shift enter, we get another object, but we want this in a list. So we'll enclose this in a list, and we get Apple and Amazon. So this is very useful, and you should be practicing some questions of MCQ and task. So now we have another higher order function, which is reduce. So to use reduce, we have to import this from a module. So it is from the func tools, import reduce. Okay. So now let's say we have a list. This was the culprit of that issue last time. What I did, I assigned a list with the list name, and we know that list is a keyword, so I cannot use that, and because of that I was getting issue and I had to restart my program. So I'll just give it a number, and numbers equals to, let's say we have few number 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, okay, and 10 also. Okay, so now what I want, that I want to calculate the sum of this list. So what I'll do, as usual, I'll write the lambda function. So lambda, then here we have two arguments, right? We want a sum. So while using reduce, we have to give two arguments. Okay, then we'll give a colon and x plus y. So when we hit shift enter, we get an object as usual, and then we will enclose this in reduce to use the reduce function. So when I hit shift enter, it says reduce expected at least two arguments, quote one, because we know that these all higher order functions expects two arguments. The first is the lambda function, and second is the list. So in list we have these numbers. So let me go and give the numbers here, and now when I hit shift enter, we get the sum of this whole list. So that's how powerful it is. So what is happening here, let me show you what it does. It will first calculate the sum of this number 1 plus 2, then 3 plus 3 6, then 6 plus 4 10, then 10 plus 5. So what it does, it will like go from left to right, and it will calculate the sum. So that's how it works. We can also use in some other examples. Let me show you. So I'll just comment it here, that for sum calculation, and let's say we want to find the minimum price. So what we can do, find the minimum price. So here again, let's say we have the same list. So I'll give here, and let me give it numbers 1 and numbers 2. So as usual, we'll write the lambda function. So lambda keyword, then the arguments, which is x and y, because reduce expect two arguments, make sure, because it will perform operations on two variables, x and y. And then again, the sum of this will become x, and the y will become 3. So the colon, and then if what it will do, it will go and it will like x equals to 1 and y equals to 2, and it will check which is smaller. So if x is smaller, it will print x, right? If x is less than y, else it will print y. Correct? So now we have a lambda function. What I'll do, I'll just hit shift enter, and we'll get a lambda object. Then we want to apply reduce here, right? So reduce, and we know that reduce expects two arguments. The first is lambda function, and the second is the list. So the numbers, and when we hit shift enter, we get the 1, right? If let's say if I write this at the last place, it will still calculate and give me the answer, that is 1. So this was the comprehensive explanation of the functions. And now we are done with the functions. And now it's your responsibility. If you want to really grow and learn quickly as soon as possible, you should be attempting all the multiple choice questions, which are free for you. There is no cost. And again, you should be solving all the tasks, which has a special mini project, which will definitely help you to gain this whole function concept in a very detailed way. Just go and attempt all those things and let me know if you face any difficulties. We are here to help you. So with that being said, I will see you in the next video. Until then, bye bye, take care, have a nice day.